It's another Manly Monday, and this Manly Monday comes from the Discord server. Someone linked this article with the study on the Discord, and I'm like, this is a really good topic for Manly Monday. Is MeToo a colossal failure? Well, there's data, and the data's not great. For a recap, MeToo started in the early 2000s, but it really came to prominence around 2017 when Alyssa Milano signal boosted Tarana Burke's original campaign. And so between 2006 and 2017 is the period where Me Too really got going. And according to this article, well, there is a big gender divide in younger voters regarding how they identify, and that's what we're going to get in today. If you like this kind of content, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone can use but can't afford it, coffee.com/Leanna K, or you can kick some bucks to our men's groups, our men's work. They're going to get started up again soon on our Discord. The Patreon and Ko-fi donations give you access to our Discord. We verify identities through that so that you know you're talking to an actual real person and not a bot or a troll. So what have we got here? Here we go. Sorry, I got to switch over. 3 screens is still not enough for me. Here we go. Okay, so this is an article in the Financial Times, which is a British publication that leans classically liberal. I want to declare the sort of slant of the publication so that people know this is not, some hard right site. It is not a left-wing site. So, I want you to know what it's a British site using an American poll, and it's a Gallup poll. We'll talk about why that's important in a minute, but here goes. So we have a wide ideological gap is opening up between young men and women in countries across the world. And so you can see South Korea, men are tilting extremely conservative. You see the US, young men, 18 to 29-year-old men, so Gen Z, that kills my Canadian pronunciation, Gen Z, still do lean liberal by a little bit, but and you'll notice there's actually a spike in the trend line there before it plummets. But yes, we are hitting sort of neutral for men, while women are surging liberal. Germany, you see a dip towards a conservative for men. And then the UK, young men and young women both lean very solidly liberal, but there was a divide around 2010. Now, again, this article, talks about, I'll scroll up. Whoops, wrong way. I'll scroll up to the headline. A new global gender divide is emerging. The article talks about Me Too and talks about this stuff. But again, Me Too really kicked off in 2010. So in order to definitively go, this is a Me Too problem, we have to isolate kind of, what else might be going on here. Now you see in the data, 2017, yeah, that is when it kicked off, right? You do see up, down. Now, South Korea, not the West, unique problems there. The shift towards conservatism in men starts way before Me Too was even a thing. In the US, obviously, we've got the Obama years and then the not Obama years. And then in Germany, it's been a slow, not big on liberalism, dip and back up. So there's been a recovery in Germany, as opposed to, a loss of support for liberalism that may be because of Angela Merkel's leadership and the passing of the torch, although it spiked earlier than that. And then the UK is its own thing. And interestingly, men in the UK were more liberal than women until something happened in 2010. And then we got a rather surging divide. So to me, this data is not really compelling in terms of MeToo being the only cause, but let's talk about what happened in the various parts of the world, because obviously the schism happened at various times. Now, there was a general election in the United Kingdom in 2010 when there was a major change. It shifted from the Labour years of blanking on his name, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, to David Cameron's Conservative era, and the UK has stayed conservative ever since. That suggests to me that that's more of a flex point in attitudes than anything else in the UK. Germany has had some issues for quite some time with reunification, so on and so forth. I'm old enough to remember when the Berlin Wall still stood. Yeah. The US, obviously the divide has been more gradual. The contract with America, again, you'll notice that Americans at one point, young men, were more conservative than women. And then it got, more liberal than women. My mistake. And, until the mid 80s, and I wish they indicated the exact year this happened here, because there was a major recession in the 1980s where, for the first time, college-educated men were laid off in large numbers. If you watch the original Ghostbusters, there is a theme of that there. So I think it's undeniable that Me Too is part of a larger trend in discussions of gender, opinions of gender, so on and so forth. But there's more going on than what this article claims, and it being Me Too being a thing, because you see the divide happening in 3 out of the 4 countries measured. That has nothing to do with Me Too. Even in the US, the split was happening mid 2000s. And I do think that there is something to be said for greater diversity measures missing the mark. And ironically enough, that is in part because people did critical theory real bad, critical race theory real bad. There's one pillar of the overall concept of critical race theory that talks about interest convergence, meaning you're not going to get change unless you show the allegedly dominant group that greater inclusion benefits them too. No one tends to sign up for having things taken away from them because emotionally that is a loss, and the brain responds to loss much more strongly than it responds to gain. What do you mean by that, Leanna? Well, think about it. If you win $100 just out of the blue, you just win $100, you find $100. That's pretty cool, right? But you lose $100, that freaking stinks. The loss of $100 hurts more than the gain of $100 feels good. That is the brain. And so in order to get progress, we have to show that any gender progression benefits everybody. Any race progression, racial equality progression benefits everybody. Every gender identity progression benefits everybody. Don't get mad at me. This is just how it works. And science and social sciences and out there stuff like critical race theory that started as a legal thing and then broke containment, everything agrees that if you want buy-in, you have to persuade, and persuasion means showing people what's in it for them. And, being a good ally. Akila, who I adore, and she is much better in hair and makeup than me. I didn't do this. But she talks about the fact that you have to persuade, you can't coerce. Please check out her channel for this stuff. She also did a glorious video recently about, a little talked about element of transition for transgender people. So go Akila. We love Akila. But MeToo is kind of bundled up in this overall very, very punitive era of change. It wasn't just, it isn't just Me Too. It's Black Lives Matter and the whole defund the police thing that was disastrous. It's a particular type of radical feminism in the UK that, I don't think you can separate any one thing from what's going on in the UK culturally. The class struggle in the UK is very unique. And a lot of, women who thought they could rise through basically capitalism in the UK hit that, ancestral class ceiling. And that isn't talked about a lot. I've talked before about how I think that's why J.K. Rowling went nuts. Because she has no peers, literally, in that she is new money. She may live in a castle, but she is not nobility by blood. And that matters there. Germany has a very aggressive take on a lot of social things because of its unique history with the Holocaust. And I'm going to be very careful there, because of my background. But I give Germany a lot of credit for owning that entire period of history. Certain things tend to be just a immediate crackdown on things like, nope, ever again. And I really appreciate the intention there, but you have to be constantly careful of an overcorrection. We see in Canada, and I pulled this up because Canada's not represented in these statistics, because it's like, in Canada, it's always been more likely that men are going to vote conservative than women. And we have this weird thing where it gets men and women who are older tend to vote conservative more often because those generations of women are more likely to vote in their husband's best interest. And then you see a divergence and a divergence and a divergence, and then everything goes wild, starting in who's below meet millennials, right, and Gen Z. Give or take. I mean, year to year, obviously our parties are diverging, but we do not yet have the level of distance. One, because we don't have a two-party system. Two, because we don't have mixed proportional voting. And people are like, what? Mixed proportional voting is good. It's good in theory, but everywhere there's mixed proportional voting, conservative governments benefit. And Germany was one of the most functional examples of mixed proportional voting. If you don't know what mixed proportional voting is, it's a type of voting where the popular vote, so instead of geographic seat allocation being the only way to get representation in government, there's either entirely just popular vote, that is proportional voting, it's proportional representation. Mixed proportional systems mean that there are individual seats, and then an additional percentage of the seats in government come from the popular vote. So it's designed to reflect the overall political slant of the country. What it does is makes individual regional representation weaker in favor of a more national or federalist tilt. And when one of the biggest broken campaign promises by the Trudeau government was election reform. They ran an election reform the first time, and the problem is there was no agreement because ranked choice balloting tends to benefit more liberal parties. Mixed proportional tends to benefit conservatives because the coalitions that form, conservatives are just better at agreeing on stuff, like agreeing on major things. And that's why Netanyahu is in power in Israel right now with 12% of the vote. And this matters. And how did I get from MeToo to this? Well, we can't look at any single thing in a vacuum. Has there been a real pile-on, as I said in Boss Fight, WSCM, right? Has there been a pile-on white, straight, cisgender men? Yeah. Has it been fair? I don't think so. Have black, straight, cisgender men been completely erased? Yes. Have straight trans men been erased? Yes. you might see where I'm going here. We've kind of screwed the pooch on this whole identity category approach to things. Because, again, when I go back to the data, even though there's a divide, other than in South Korea and Germany by a smidge, young men still lean liberal. And so this idea that young men are the problem is actually not backed up by the data. You know, if an election was held in the US just with the 18 to 29 demo, well, liberals would be in power, like solidly across the board. US is a very strongly first past the post system. And, you know, it's men by a smidge, but 18 to 29-year-old men have never voted majority conservative. So they're less liberal, but they're not liberal. And, you know, in the US with, you know, starting in the 90s, and it's funny because you saw the uptick in young men being liberal after the whole Contract with America thing with Newt Gingrich and company. But then, you know, I guess the end of, no, when was Obama in office? It was 2009 to 2017. Okay, so that directly correlates. That's interesting. The election of Barack Obama, almost very neatly, see it's going up, up, up together, and progressives don't like that, but something happened there. And I mean, similarly, the whole Trudeau phenomenon in Canada. The thing about both Obama and Trudeau is they campaign kind of more liberal, but they governed as more centrist in the U.S. The checks and balances of the U.S. system explain that a lot more than the fact that, you know, Trudeau flanked the NDP on rhetoric. Oh, Zelda, when did you get there? And that meant a lot of men felt thrown under the bus. But I don't think politics created that, because that meant that a lot of men were predisposed to feeling thrown under the bus, because it's politics. Political rhetoric tends to be big, broad, and cartoonish, no matter who's saying it. And, I think that the Obama years of hope and change, followed by same old, probably explain more for young men who have seen the greatest declines in terms of opportunities and, general well-being standards of any group. And it's not, it's not just that everybody else caught up. There has been a decline in, men going to college and okay, the skilled trades are awesome. We need more skilled tradesmen. But something's happening here, and it can't entirely be explained by micro factors. I think what it is that while we have been focusing on all these other groups, and while certain groups have gone, we're going to focus on men's rights, we have neglected men's mental health and men's community. And that doesn't mean that some things didn't need to change, because, the highest rate of suicide has been men all along the board, way back, right? It's an issue when men hit definitely their 50s. And previous to that, the number one cause of death in young men is like accidents, basically, reckless behavior. So it's never like the boys have been okay. And I think that's something we have to talk about and get away from the idea of rights, because that language is just wrong. It's like there's no right on paper that's being taken away. It's community. It's a positive individualized identity. The messaging of, it was well-meaning, and I say this as somebody who was involved with, we called it White Ribbon back in the 90s after the L'École Polytechnique shooting in Montreal. The whole violence against women thing, it was well-meaning to go, don't ask women to protect themselves, teach men not to be violent and abusive. And I think we lost sight of the individual in that messaging. And I don't think that means anybody had bad intent. I know I didn't have ill intent. We just wanted the problem to stop. But as overall indicators of equality have improved, that message has not evolved, and we know that last 10% before parity is super sticky, because then we get almost into the quantum realm of activism, and we can't do the big broad identity categories. We have to start working on the individual level, and at that point our language has to become less gendered and more individualized. And we do have to, I think, normalize and center the good men instead of normalizing and centering the bad men. And what do I mean by that? I mean that when we talk about, the advocates of things like the Duluth model and a very gendered view of intimate partner violence do talk about men as inherently predatory, that men have this evil in them that needs to be actively trained out of them. And we know that's not true. We know we know that men, to at least some extent, are socialized into being a lower emotional vocabulary and more prone to risk-taking and aggression. And people argue the risk-taking is biological. We cannot neatly separate nature versus nurture on that point. There may be some, there may be some testosterone element there, but I'm a freaking lunatic, and I'm not high tea in anybody's universe, okay? There is a certain inherent individual quality, but there is also socialization. As big a jerk as my father is, he wanted a boy, so guess how I was raised. And look what I got. Now, okay, gender can't be trained, to be clear. People's gender identity cannot be learned, cannot be trained. It's more kind of socialization and expectations I'm talking about in terms of that. And am I sorry that I was raised more rough and tumble? No, I actually, in some ways it benefited me. In some ways it also traumatized me. And I think that's true of a lot of guys who were raised through that system. I work with guys every day who avoid conflict at all costs because it's going to be their fault. And they have partners, they have women in their lives who do perpetuate that men are to blame for everything thing, and that is not healthy for anybody. It's not. There are women who are abusive. It often does not rise to the realm of criminal. And even in the cases where their behavior was criminal, a lot of children feel very, very protective of their mothers and don't want to get them into trouble, right? And we have to create a system that is more restorative as opposed to punitive for everybody. Because we have to decide whether we want to prevent abuse or whether we want to punish the guilty. And if we want to prevent abuse, we do have to create an empathy-driven approach. And that doesn't make anybody feel tough. And this was the thing that finally convinced me to start doing men's content, because I'm an asshole. I am a tough person. I'm very caring to my friends and, other people I care about, but I'm not kawaii, I'm not the typical, oh, it's okay, pet the head. No, I'm a tough motherfucker. And I think that there are ways to support and nurture men that doesn't involve feminized language and lets them keep their balls, to be completely blunt about it. And I think that one of the big things is community. I think that environments that are supportive spaces, not safe spaces, are incredibly important for men. I've seen, for everybody. But, there's a unique thing. Some men get into this rut where they have so much guilt for prior bad acts that they need constant praise from people around them. And eventually it means less and less and less, because people start knowing that if you don't say something nice, he's not going to take it well. And it's going to be one of those, when you say to them, like, look, you're arguing with me. I'm not arguing, which is arguing about arguing. And everybody knows this is happening. But the guy is so deep in denial because he's so driven by guilt that he needs more and more and more praise, and it works less and less and less well because deep down inside, he knows everybody around him is just kissing his ass. And in a lot of cases, it does go back to the guy's mother and needing other people, especially other women, to fill the void in that man's life that mom left by being both too permissive and neglectful and possibly abusive as well. And we do need to give men supportive spaces where they are challenged. The language of the left in its highly, highly feminized, it got nicknamed snowflake language, just doesn't appeal to men who have never felt like not even the ideal man, but an acceptable man. And a message, a program can't work if the program is making the participants feel like failures who can never win. And I do think that is part of where MeToo failed, because it became a women versus men thing, forgetting guys like Terry Crews, who came forward during it. Yeah, remember that? Yeah. And Brendan Fraser, remember that? Yeah. We need to start doing more reclamation and healing stuff. We need to let people say what happened and focus on letting that person get it out of their system and heal and move on, and start really focusing on the insidiousness of emotional abuse instead of focusing on violence, because violence is criminal. Okay, like we all know that's wrong. It's the lead up. People don't start violent. The emotional abuse is where we can catch it before it gets worse, and where we can catch it when, the majority of abuse where women abuse men stays. Right? It's a win-win. There's that interest convergence. There's what we're looking for. If we focus on abusive behaviors and point them out for what they are without gendered Duluth model wheels, or without making it be an LGBTQ thing, if we're just like people who do things to and with people, everybody can be on board. And it doesn't become this us versus them thing. And I think that these models that show like voting intentions, is there anything wrong with being conservative? I don't think so. I judge people as individuals. The organized conservative parties have gotten scary to me in a lot of ways, with their anti-trans policy and anti-immigrant policies and a whole bunch of other things. But the individual conservative voter, I know a lot of them do not agree with those elements. So we have to be nuanced, but we also have to be truly inclusive. And I think that the biggest failing of MeToo was that it was not. It was only women who had bad experiences instead of anybody who had a bad experience. And we can still do something about that. I think the whole MeToo label might be poisoned right now in men's spaces, which is unfortunate, but I'll go with it. But the concept of allowing people to speak and allowing people to be heard and supported and yet still challenged, we still have hope there. So that's my time. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. If you want to join our Discord, Patreon's probably, the least lump sum way you can join, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for somebody who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. We could really use that for a few guys right now who are really struggling with some of this stuff. Or if you just want to kick a few bucks to our men's work, GoFundMe is the way to go. Thanks for watching. There we go. Manly Mondays.